Creek. Got your microphones back on. Ready? I'd like to call this meeting of Lancaster County Council back to order. Do I have a motion to come out of executive session?
Move.
Second.
Have a motion for Mr. Carr, second for Ms. McGriff. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval.
In executive session, a briefing on a contractual matter and a pending or threatened litigation matter occurred. No decisions were made, no votes taken.
Thank you. Let's move down to number 7, our citizens' comments. Please bear in mind that this is not a period of dialogue with council or a question and answer period. This is your opportunity to address council with your concerns. I ask that you address your remarks to council as a body and not to any individual council member. Please speak into the microphones, state your name and address for the record, and you will have up to 3 minutes to address council. Your time will not start until you have provided your name and address.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
when you get to the last one, I have 2 electronic comments I need to mention for the record.
Okay. First, we have Dana Wilson.
Good evening, Lancaster County Council. My name is Dana Wilson, and I would like to thank you in advance for your time. I'm here tonight on behalf of my family to put a face to the Wilson Creek land rezoning request in Indian Land. While on paper it may seem that the applicant of the rezoning request is coming from a developer, in truth, the request is coming from the Wilson family, a family with strong and proud roots in the Indian Land community who has owned and farmed the land in question over 200 years. In fact, so deep are our roots in Lancaster County, we can trace our ancestors many generations back when James Wilson arrived in the Carolinas from Ireland. And in the documentation of the Wilson family history, there is a picture of my grandfather in 1909 as a young boy on the porch of his Indian Land home where he would stay and one day raise a family of his own. My Aunt Adele, my Uncle Leonard, and my father, James Wilson. Jim Wilson Road, the road beside Walgreens that intersects with 521, is named after my great Uncle Jimmy. The request for rezoning is not from the builder. It's coming from a family whose history is deep in the Indian Land community. Indian Land citizens of a certain age certainly remember my grandmother, lovingly known as Miss Nancy. If any of your family members attended Indian Land school between 1946 and 1967, my grandmother was their 3rd grade teacher. And if they were members of Bel Air Church, she was their Sunday school teacher. My Uncle Leonard, a decorated Vietnam fighter pilot, and his family, my first cousins, have always called Indian Land home, even though the military life would not allow them to live there. And as my grandmother, I too teach in Lancaster County at Beaufort High School. I have for 15 years, and there's no other place I'd rather be. The decision to sell the land was not an easy one for my family. My father passed 11 years ago, and his brother and sister, now in their late 80s, would like to see what the property will become in their lifetime. They have hopes to set up college funds for the grandchildren. something that my grandmother, a Lancaster County career educator, would be so proud of. In addition, my uncle has cared for his special needs nonverbal granddaughter for the past 20 years. It's his request that he be allowed to provide for her after his death. To close, our family's ability to sell this land is contingent upon obtaining the rezoning of the property. We feel that Baynard Development, who has agreed to deed 2 acres to the Township of Indian Land to use it as it sees fit, possibly for a fire station, will be a good fit for this community and a good steward of the land that the Wilson family has called home for generations.
Thank you. Mr. Evan Freeman.
Hello, Council. My name is Evan Freeman. I live at 2551 North Legacy Park in Indian Land. I'm here to speak about impact fees and how much they mean to our community. I hope that we can move forward in an expeditious manner because while this is a tool that the state legislator has allowed us to use, it's not the golden bullet that we're all hoping for. We know the growth is coming. The study we just paid for shows 40,000 people will be in our area in the next decade. We have to plan for it. This council is going to be on the hook, and future councils are going to be on the hook if we don't act now. If we had impact fees in place for last year, instead of developer agreements, we'd have over $3 million in our accounts. Everybody from the Fort Mill side of things sees the impact fees and sees the benefits that they offer, and they think that this is the greatest thing. So we're talking about people who had previous issues, who thought that it might hurt growth, but we've seen it play out in the data. Just across the river, we're seeing growth still happen, and the county is able to manage growth. The impact fee is only going to cover 90% of the damage that comes from new growth. I'm just asking us to act urgently and as quickly as we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Pamela Hams.
I'm Pamela Helms. I live at 7903 Henry Harris Road, and I've already stated all my concerns. I gave you a packet of pictures to kind of look through, to kind of see where my thoughts are, and I just wanted to thank you for your time. You have a full plate tonight. I know your jobs are not easy, and I just want to tell you, as a citizen of Lancaster County, I do appreciate all of you.
Thank you. Mr. Ryan Urban.
Good evening. Can I pass each councilman a...
Give it to Mr. Willis.
All right, my name is Ryan Urban at 7907 Henry Harris Road, and I'm here to talk about the rezoning for that property. And I'd like to point out that page 96 in your packet tonight is showing a image that's from prior to our ownership. And one of the things that might be helpful to be able to see there is there's a round pin where we've proposed putting our overflow parking, that when we first bought the property in January of 2019, we removed that, and we removed a play center for children so that there would be room for that future potential use as a parking lot. So that was something we wanted to be able to point out there. But my wife and I purchased this horse farm back in January of 2019 for the adventure of owning a horse farm, and with 2 young kids, we thought that would be an exciting thing to do. We realized shortly thereafter that we'd bit off more than we can chew with full-time jobs and children to raise, and so we subsequently put the property up for sale or lease, and we found a tenant in July of 2020 who then leased throughout the remainder of 2020 and into 2021. This is a small horse barn and less an operation. It's not a big operation that's going to see lots and lots of traffic. There's only 15 stalls, and the arena is only large enough to handle 2, maybe 3 horses at a time, and then you would have overcrowding and not be able to have the horses all, or people ride all at the same time. My wife and I, we've gone out there on a regular basis, and we've never seen the standard parking lot full where you couldn't get in or get out or have additional space for more people to be able to come. I mean, when you go out there, it's 3 or 4 cars at a time is really all we've ever seen, including our own when we go. When we stopped our stable operations and we put it up and advertised it, we did so as a property for horse boarding business. So it was never our intention to give up that operation or that use of that land. When we got the land appraised for our Ag South loan, that was based upon the business income as being able to get the valuation for the purchase price. We put in all of our savings in order to put the down payment for the loan with Ag South, and then also the funds that we used to be able to clean up the property at the time of purchase to where it would be ready to be able to be in an operating condition. During the time that we were advertising it for sale or lease, we continue to maintain it, keep it aesthetically pleasing, ready for use. Didn't let it go in disrepair at all, and continue to do so through today. The reason we hired an attorney to represent us through this process of rezoning and talking to the rezoning board was because we're fearful of losing our investment that we've put into this property, because if it is not capable of being used as a horse stable that it's been for the last 30 years, it's going to substantially decrease the value that it was worth at the time that we bought it. For all the time that we've owned it and had operations out there, we've never once been contacted by our neighbors with a complaint. I've reached out on a couple occasions for this rezoning, and to try to be able to see if there was common ground to be able to reach. The only feedback that I got was that there was some fear that with the rezoning, there could be, in the future, in the long term, there could be another type of business that could be ran on the property. And I'd like to point out, and you'll see in the packet, that per the easement agreement, the only business or industrial use of this property that the easement can be used for is for a horse boarding type facility. And so no other business, regardless of what the rezoning new zone says, could be operated on there and use that easement, which is our only access point onto the property. I can say for as long as we've owned it, that we have never parked on the easement, and nor have any of our guests or visitors, not a single time. And one of the first...
Could you wrap it on up here
Yes, sir.
the next minute?
Yes, sir. One of the first things that we did when we bought the property was we re-gravelled our parking lot. We got rid of bushes and stuff that was enclosing it to be able to widen it to the maximum that it could be. We added a spot where 2 trailers can fit next to the mobile home that's on site. And like I'd mentioned before, we got rid of the ring, what's it called? The little ring and the play equipment, so that there would be room for future spots for parking. So I can tell you with 100% confidence that there's plenty of parking on the lot. In closing, I'd like to kindly ask that you approve this rezoning so our property can maintain its value, functionality, and enjoyment to the surrounding community. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Johnny Martin.
Good evening, Council. My name is Johnny Martin. I'm at 6671 Waxhaw Highway. I was under the understanding that Rox was going to be representing us. This is not for, I don't have comments. We just wanted to make sure that we were, in case there was something that we could address it. Okay.
Next, we have Wayne Murray.
Good evening. I'm Reverend Wayne Murray, and this gentleman to my right is Mr. Ben Dunlap. He is our director of our drug court here in Lancaster. We're both from Hope on the Hill, and we have come to the county council because I believe about 2 years ago you were gracious enough to give us $200,000 to work on our project at Hope on the Hill for our auditorium. We have tried to work it every which way we can with the school district, and because of COVID and because of the delay in our ability to do the project, we're needing to come back and ask you for an additional approximately $40,000. And it's because simply our people who are doing the work have had to go up on their prices. The sound systems, all of our people who have come in anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 over what they originally estimated their cost to be, and we're stuck. So we're coming back to ask the county council. I don't know if there's any more left in that pot where you originally got it from, but I think I sent a letter to Steve Willis. I don't know if that was the right one to send it to, but Steve Willis has always been a great advocate for us, so I sent it to Steve Willis, and I guess it was the right one because I'm standing up here today. So we're coming, asking you again, if there's an additional $40,000, we will be able to finish the project. We've got a whole lot of it done. We're just trying to now just put the final touches on it. The stage is done. There's just a part of that stage which was the way that they made that stage when it was Bar Street. It had to have a certain kind of front put on it. Well, the way they had the front on there, there's only one guy in South Carolina that can make it. So when he finished, the price of it was more than what we expected. We found that out in a couple things that we ran into. So we're coming back to the county council if you can find it in your graces to grant us another additional $40,000. We would like to do it. I know you can't ask us any questions, but Ms. McGriff is on our board. I'm sure she can answer any questions if you want. Has been in all of our meetings.
I'd just like to add that, you know, with this additional funds, this is going to help us complete this project. Our goal and our objective is for this to be a fully operational center so that we can provide services to the youth and the families, not only in this area, but in this entire community. So having those additional dollars allow us to complete this project so that once we get through COVID, we become fully functional at this center. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Y'all. Mike Neese.
Good evening, Mike Neese, 303 Straightaway Lane in Indian Land. Just wanted to comment tonight on the impact fees that are on the agenda. I'm glad to see this is finally on the docket. For those that have moved to our area here in the last 20 years, they probably don't realize that in 1998, we did not even have zoning in Indian Land. It was a blinking stoplight and not much else there. We had to go to another town just to have a grocery store. Since then, we've been one of the fastest growing communities in the southeast, and for that matter, the country. And right now, if Indian Land were its own town, we would be the 8th or 9th largest city in the state of South Carolina, based on the population and where we come in on that. As one of the other commenters made a comment a few minutes ago, I'm hearing numbers now of as high as another 41,000 people more moving in over the next 10 years with what's on the docket. For anybody that's been in business, growth is expensive. It's only fair for us to look at a way for this new building to add those impact fees to be able to help some of our infrastructure here in the county. It's hard enough to make the budgets work and to balance those numbers, and when we're out there having to now absorb that within the county budget, I think we've got to look at those impact fees. And on top of that, the majority of the building is in that Indian Land area. If we do not pass those fees, then all of a sudden, we're passing those costs on to everybody in the entire county, and that's really not fair for folks on the southern end of the county that's not growing to be having to absorb some of the fees that would come with the dramatic growth that we have in the Indian Land area. While I'm not a fan of more taxes and more costs, there are times where you got to pay for some things, and I do think a prudent decision on these impact fees is for the better of our community as we continue to grow here in the future. Thank you.
Mr. Willis?
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, we had 2 electronic comments. I believe y'all have copies of these already. The first one was from Claire McConaughey, was very much in support of the concept of an impact fee. The second one was from Claire on behalf of the Indian Land Action Council, who indicated on their Facebook page they had 14 responders, all of which were in favor of the impact fee. And I believe y'all have electronic hard copies of the electronic comments.
All right, thank you, Mr. Willis. That concludes our citizens' comments. Let's move on down to item number 8, our consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve consent agenda items 8A, 8B, and 8C.
Second.
We took 8C. So you want to restate that motion?
Took off C, correct?
Okay, yeah.
8A and 8B.
Okay,
Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Mostello, second from Ms. McGriff. All in favor, raise your right hand. We had unanimous approval of our consent agenda. Let's move down to our non-consent agenda. Item 9A, we have public hearing and resolution 1138-R 2021 regarding approval of a conditional use application for a non-franchise car dealership. We'll have a report from staff first. Mr. Burhans?
Chair, I recuse myself from these next 2
Okay.
items.
And you have
Already
stated
signed the report.
your,
Signed the forms.
all right, Mr. Mostello is recusing himself, and the clerk has a copy of the recusal. All right. Go ahead, Mr. Burhans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of council, good to be before you this evening. We are going to discuss actually 2 conditional use permits that I've just combined into a single presentation as they are to support one project. And that project is to establish a major vehicle auto repair business as well as what's referred to in our ordinance as a non-franchised car sales business as one facility involving 2 properties and 2 buildings. This facility is located on Waxhaw Highway, about 850 feet east of the intersection of 521. The applicant is iNetwork Auto Group. As a means of reference, this site is actually in the Southern Panhandle Small Area Plan, which is also going to be on your agenda for adoption this evening. It designates this area as employment, and we find it consistent with that plan, subject to it being adopted this evening. Just to get you oriented further with the site, the aerial to the left, it shows the subject property. I will note that the parcel, it picks up additional buildings that are not part of the conditional use permit request. So I have given you an aerial photo showing you the 2 buildings that are subject of this application. It's the 2 on the far left. With all conditional use permits, we do require a concept plan to be shown to demonstrate how they intend to comply with ordinance requirements. Some key features on these 2 plans are, 1, there are currently 3 driveways serving these buildings. They intend to consolidate those driveways into 2, and they will further add landscape buffering along the frontage of Waxhaw Highway, along with landscape buffering on the western edge of the property line in compliance with our ordinance. They are also going to have cross-access between these 2 sites. So there's already, I think, a small drive now, and they're going to widen it and make it more functional for regular everyday use. This item did go before the Planning Commission, and it did get a unanimous recommendation of approval. Staff further recommended approval of it. I would ask you to remind the council you will need to hold 2 separate hearings for these items because, again, it's 2 conditional use permits and 1 presentation. And then once you're ready to make a final decision, you'll need to make 2 separate motions and 2 separate votes for each of the resolutions that are before you, 1138 and 1139. I'll certainly make myself available for any questions, and the applicant is present if you have any questions regarding their business.
I got one question. Is in the 521 overlay, you said it's 850 feet, so part of it is that?
Part of it, excuse me, sorry. Part of it does get clipped by it. You are correct. It's because everything within the overlay is roughly 1,000 feet.
So they have to confirm that piece to the requirements of the overlay? How are you going to do that?
Yeah, we'll get that question a lot, actually. So, yeah, the Highway Corridor Overlay District is very, I'll just say, silent on how do you manage existing development, particularly existing development that's not going in and adding new buildings or adding, completely changing their site. So the Highway Corridor wouldn't have a lot of applicability on this property because it is already an existing facility. And for example, in the Highway Corridor, there are provisions where parking has to be to the rear. Well, when a site already has existing parking along the frontage of the road, it's not prescribed to have it relocated, and it didn't seem like it would be reasonable. So I think the intent with most of the Highway Corridor is to apply to new development because the requirements are so different than the regular code, and also, or in instances where you're changing the site dramatically or adding new buildings and work it in incrementally that way. Yes, sir.
All right, any more questions? All right, we have a public hearing on these first two. Can I do those together, or do I need to do them separate?
I would commence a public hearing on each of them separately.
Okay.
And just for the audience to say, reference that we're dealing with both items, 8A and B, I believe, concurrently.
Okay. All right. We do have a public hearing scheduled on this, but no one signed up to speak. So I will close the public hearing on this, and I'm looking for a motion to bring this matter to the floor.
So moved.
Have a motion for Mr.
Second.
Graff. Second. For Mr. Graham, any discussion? I think we're ready to vote. We have a motion for approval of Resolution 1138-R 2021. All in favor, raise your right hand. Our resolution passes 6 for, none against, and 1 recusal. As Mr. Burhan said, he went over Resolution 1139-R 2021. It's the same car dealership. There's a public hearing on this. No one signed up, so we will move on. And I'm looking for a motion to bring this matter to the floor.
Second.
I have a motion for Mr. Blackman, a second for Mr. Carnes. Any discussion? I think we're ready to vote. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have our motion passes 6 for, none against, and 1 recusal. All right, would you bring in Mr. Mosteller, please? All right, let's move down to 8C. We have a public hearing and third reading of ordinance 2021-1699 regarding the potential transfer of county property to the Council on Aging. Mr. Willis?
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, there's no change from second reading other than we do have an MOU. John, I don't know if you have any comments on that, but we did specify that with the Council on Aging.
Correct. As requested by County Council, we entered a MOU, which again recites the deed restrictions and the reversion to county, has the potential grantee of the property agree that that is the conditions they're getting the property on. And again, sets forth explicitly their hours of operation, so there's no question as to the shared use of that lot.
And would note this would be a joint project. The parking lot would benefit both the Council on Aging as well as our Parks and Recreation Services.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Willis? Thank you. We do have a public hearing on this matter. No one signed up, so we will move, and I'm looking for a motion to bring this matter to the floor.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion from Mr. Carnes, a second from Ms. McGriff. Any discussion? I think we're ready
Just
to
like
vote.
to say that this is a great joint project, the county jointly involved with it just by selling the property for a de minimis value, but it's going to benefit our Parks and Recreation Department tremendously.
All right, I agree with Mr. Carnes. All right, so we have a motion on the floor. I think we're ready to vote. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Third reading of ordinance 2021-1699. Let's move down to 9D, public hearing and third reading of ordinance 2021-1712 regarding conveyance of surplus property on Happy Trail. Mr. Willis, Mr. DeBose.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, there's no change from second reading on this. Would note that this is some surplus property. Council originally tried to sell a number of years ago, and we didn't have any takers. My understanding, this property was purchased way before my time to be a recycling center site, but why would you put a convenience site on a one-lane dirt road? Just never really worked out. Subsequently, we did have somebody that expressed an interest in potentially purchasing the property. We did go through the full procurement process. It was publicly bid, advertised. All the I's were dotted, T's were crossed on that. We did receive one bid. Highest bid was $30,000, which does exceed the estimated tax value on the property. Recommend approval.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Willis? We do have a public hearing scheduled on this. No one signed up, so we will move on, and I'm looking for a motion to bring.
Move to approve.
Have a motion from Mr. Mosteller. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. McGriff. Any discussion? Think
Mr.
we're ready to
Willis.
vote. All in favor, raise your right
I
hand.
wanted to ask the question, where will
ahead.
these funds be utilized, or?
They will be put into the general fund unless council at a subsequent meeting desires to earmark them for something. You certainly could, but by statute goes into the general fund.
And my thought was to earmark them potentially for other convenience sites.
That would be up
Work
to
at
the discretion of
convenience
council.
sites.
Yes, sir.
We need to put it in that motion tonight.
No, ma'am, we can do that next meeting. Or if you have something specific you want, let us know. We can have it at the next meeting.
Okay. All right, we got a motion on the floor for approval. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Okay, let's move down to 9E, third reading of ordinance 2021-1700 regarding rezoning property located at 7907 Henry Harris Road. Mr. Burham, we need a motion. We don't have a public hearing. We have a motion to
approve. So moved.
have a motion from Ms. McGriff. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion from Ms. McGriff. Second, Mr. Honeycutt. Mr. Burhans.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This, just as a reminder to the audience, this is a proposed rezoning of approximately 20 acres from low-density residential to rural neighborhood, and the property is located on Henry Harris Road between Shelley Mullis and Jim Wilson. At the second reading that occurred on January 25th, council reviewed this item, and prior to approving second reading, you asked staff to come back with 3 pieces of information. One, you asked for more information on the site layout. How does it look as relative to parking and the driveways and overflow and things like that? So we have an exhibit for you, which we have handed out previously. You also asked to have a image with a horse trailer parked on the property. And then finally, you asked about driveway apron requirements, and I can answer that immediately, which is our Public Works Department, which would issue the driveway, which would approve the driveway apron, would need to just work with the contractor in the field to determine the appropriate apron that would be needed. In terms of the site layout, again, this is an image you have, you should have at the dais. We've taken the site and tried to break it down for you into a digestible form. So the subject property is in the blue outline. I'll just refer to that as the urban property where the horse farm is located. The driveway easement that we've had discussion on is that blue line. Again, that easement is 20 feet wide. The driveway, the paved surface is approximately 15 feet wide. The parking area that Mr. Urban described during citizen comments is the little, I guess, pink square, if you will. That's where participants come when they want to take a riding lesson or enjoy the horses. That's where they come in and park. There was also discussions about the ability to provide potential overflow parking for a busy event. That parking would occur in the yellow area. They would drive around the barn building and over to where the yellow square is. And then further, just as a means of reference, the adjacent neighbor, Mrs. Helms, resides in the property where her name is labeled. So I just want to give everyone a breakdown of that site so you could better understand. I think there were some questions at the last meeting that this might help resolve. Further, again, it was asked to also receive a picture of the site. What does it look like when a horse trailer is parked on it? We did find an old aerial. If you snoop hard enough, it's amazing what you could find on the internet. So we found a picture. This is not. I think this is some years ago, but this is a picture of the site with a horse trailer parked. It's a little fuzzy, but there's also 2 pickup trucks parked above where the horse trailer is parked. So that's what the parking area looks like when there's a horse trailer. So that was specifically requested at the previous meeting. Again, just to refamiliarize everyone with the site, these are photos you've seen in the past. So on the left is the driveway in question that provides access to the property as well as to the Helms family property. And then to the right is a picture of the barn as well as a parking area that Mr. Urban referenced as re-graveling when they purchased the property. So I just want to again refresh everyone with some eyes on the ground photos. And again, when the Planning Commission reviewed this, they unanimously recommended approval of the rezoning. Staff also recommended approval. We'll certainly take any questions you have.
All right, any questions for Mr. Burns? Any discussion?
I got one question for Mr. Burhams. If this rezoning is approved, then the applicant is going to have to bring the property up to code, the current code. Is that correct, to the UDO?
Yes, sir. So this site is currently under an ordinance, ordinance violation status. And so as part of getting them into compliance, they have chosen to go ahead and have the site rezoned appropriately so they could go ahead and legally reestablish the equestrian use. So the next step after rezoning in order to get themselves out of the violation status is to go ahead and file permits to establish the equestrian use. As part of that process, we've gone ahead and preemptively asked the fire marshal, would anything be needed to bring the site into conformance, particularly with the driveway. He has indicated that within that 20-foot easement, he would like to see the driveway widen to its maximum ability within the 20-foot easement. So again, right now it's 15 feet, and it would be widened, if it could be widened to 20 feet, that's what his office would like to see, or some number as close to 20 as they can functionally get.
And that would be a requirement based upon the fire marshal's recommendation.
That is correct.
All right, any more discussion? All right, we have a motion for approval of third reading of ordinance 2021-1700. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? The third reading passes 4 and 3 opposed. So third reading passes. Let's move down to 9F, third reading of ordinance 2021-1704 regarding adopting amendments to the elements of the comprehensive plan by adoption of the Southern Panhandle Small Area Plan. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion for Mr. Graham, second for Mr. Carnes. Mr. Burhan?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Staff asked to have this item brought for third reading to be placed on the non-consent agenda, just so we can contemplate some minor changes to the plan base from what was approved at second reading. So just in brief, actually, I'll just jump to the map. So in brief, the image to the left is I'll call it the old map from second reading. The image to the right is the current map that you would be asked to adopt, or a portion of it. So what did we change? So one, we removed the Dave Lyle Boulevard from the extension from the small area plan map. And so we would then just kind of did some quick research and said, okay, well, there'd still be a good opportunity for another collector road, but just not air quotes Dave Lyle Boulevard. And so you see that referenced. Second, you heard public comments, I think either at first or second reading, from a representative of the Belk family. And actually, in further research with that individual, they represent the Belk corporate interest, not the Belk family. And they have the Belk, again, call it corporate interest, owns around 40 acres at the intersection of Waxhaw Highway and 521. This is different than the 1,000 acres or thereabouts on the other side. They asked us to give consideration to a retail classification for them versus what we called employment. Staff did not have any issue with that and made that change. And so that's why you see purple old map, red current map. And then finally, we just, like any time you open up the hood of a document, you always see little things you'd like to phrase better. And so we just made some minor wordsmithing improvements here and there, but nothing worth noting. So that's the summary of the changes. Again, the Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of this item, and we would ask that you give third and final approval of this small area plan. And we appreciate your support as well as the community's support in bringing this to a conclusion.
Comments or questions for Mr. Burhan?
Yeah, I'd just like to again say that the staff did a great job. This plan started off with another entity doing it, and our staff took it over and finished it up, and they did a great job on it. I did think that I noticed or read somewhere where you're going to do now the area below 75
Yes, sir.
down to below to connect with the small area plan.
Yes, sir. And that will come back before council.
Which is good. I mean, this area, if you drive that area, you'll see lots of for sale signs, and it is going to be developed, and we need to have some kind of master plan for that area.
All right, thank you, Mr. Graham.
Chairman, I'd like to echo Mr. Graham's words. I thank you to staff for getting this wrapped up. We've had some rough bumps in the road on some of our plans and things in the past, and for staff to step up and take this on and make it happen within probably very little money by the time y'all got to it, is very appreciated for by the folks in the Panhandle. And I would say that the additions that have been proposed by the Belk Corporation or the Belk family, I think makes this plan a much stronger plan. When you've got a master developer that's developing an area, they can do a lot of things that developers that are developing 150, 200 acre tracts can't do. And I think it's going to be a signature development will go up there that will make all the county and the Panhandle proud.
All right. Any other comments? Thank you, Mr. Burhan.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. I'll convey it to staff.
Hearing no more discussion, I think we're ready to vote on third reading of ordinance 2021-1704. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. And I echo Mr. Carnes' words. We thank y'all for getting this completed. Let's move down to 9G. We have a public hearing and first reading of ordinance 2021-1701 regarding rezoning property located at the southwest intersection of Henry Harris Road and Shelley Mullis Road from RN and LDR to MDR. Mr. Burhans?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Well, excuse me. Well, staff's excited to present to you a really dynamic rezoning this evening located in the Panhandle area along Henry Harris Road. Before I jump into the meat of the project, I want to just kind of explain to you the structure of it and this presentation. Similar to that conditional use permit, this project, and I'm just going to refer to it as a project, has three key elements to it. There is first, there's a rezoning of land zoned LDR, low density residential, and rural neighborhood to medium density residential, and that contemplates roughly 169 acres. And the underlying intent for that is to construct a cluster subdivision development. The next piece, which is definitely a much more minor element, is to rezone land that's currently zoned low density residential to institutional, and that's roughly 2 acres. And the underlying intent with that, if subject to council approval, is to donate that land to Lancaster County for a future public facility, which ultimately is council's decision what that might be. And then finally, to kind of wrap up this whole arrangement, amongst other matters, is the proposed development agreement, which you may recall council required whenever a developer wished to come forward with a cluster subdivision. So we have, this presentation is going to contemplate all 3 of those elements for efficiencies, and so we can discuss it comprehensively. And then just like the conditional use permit, you'll hold separate hearings and undertake separate motions and votes at the end. And so, again, this project involves 6 parcels located at the southwest corner of Shelley Mullis and Henry Harris Road. It's referred to as the Wilson Creek Development, and the applicant is Provident Baird LLC. Okay, I just want to get everyone oriented and make sure we're on the, air quotes, on the same page. So again, this project's at the intersection of Henry Harris and Shelley Mullis. It's outlined in blue. The subject property is located adjacent to the Highland Creek and Ashley Glen neighborhoods within Lancaster County. And then also, just it's off map, but if you look further down south on Henry Harris Road, it is roughly about, I think, less than a mile from the Harris Mill development that I think the council is very familiar with, which is a future Lennar community. Okay. Also, as an element of this, you're aware that the council has adopted the RFAT's Collector Road Program to help us guide future road infrastructure in the predominantly the Panhandle community. Oddly enough, a road alignment did occur on this property. Unfortunately, they drew it in the middle of 6 Mile Creek or thereabouts. So, but we'll discuss that a little further when we look at the concept plan. But I did want to point out that where the big red arrow is pointing is a collector road that's running through the middle of their site, and we'll talk about how that was addressed with this concept plan. Okay. Again, to get everyone just oriented to the site, as I believe Ms. Wilson reported, the property owner, the property has been historically farmed, and I think last time I saw it was soybeans were out there, and that's the image of the site in the top left corner. If you were to turn yourself around, looking at the property from the intersection and look northward, you would see Crossroads Lutheran Church directly across. If you were to go again clockwise further, looking east towards North Carolina, you would see Indian Land Academy Preschool. These are both operating and both operating. And then looking kind of northeast is the final picture. Sorry, we didn't have an on-site picture, so I had to kind of clip in a Google Earth image, so apologize about that. That's looking, again, northeast towards the Ashley Glen neighborhood. Okay, so let's get into let's kind of jump into the meat of it. Again, this is the concept plan that's required as part of the development agreement process. And again, 169 acres for of the community will be for the cluster subdivision. 2 acres at the intersection will be for potential public safety or public facility. the site, some key aspects of the plan, you do have a proposed 325 lots. And so with 169 acres, or 168, 169 acres of development, you have a density of roughly 1.93 units per acre. 2.5 units per acre is the max within the MDR district. Now, just to be transparent, the site it backs up to 6 Mile Creek and the heel splitter overlays. There are, as you can just see on the map, or on the concept plan, there are a lot of encumbered lands that really aren't buildable. This site also has a Carolina Thread Trail alignment that if the subdivision, or if the project were to be approved, we would work with the developer to determine where the best alignment might be for that. I think going back to the earlier image with the collector road alignment, and sorry, I don't have a laser pointer I can point to, but you can, if you look on Shelley and Mullis, you will see the access road on Shelley Mullis that traverses through the whole site. That is intended to be the future collector road, and so that would be extended with future development if and when that ever occurred. It does have lots fronting it, but the developer worked very hard to minimize the number of lots fronting it so we could get as few interruptions with that alignment. So we really applaud the developer and taking a real honest kind of swing at how to incorporate the collector road into their development. So we were very pleased with that. As you can also see with the concept plan, plenty of opportunities for open space or an amenity center that are outside the encumbered land. And so we think that the concept, their design translated very well. And also I mentioned a public potential land donation. Again, at the intersection, you'll see 2 acres. And we actually, at Emergency Management's recommendation, used a fire station site from Rock Hill to see how it would fit and make sure there's plenty of land. And so that's the image that you're seeing there, is they actually redrew that site and plopped it on there. Okay. Now, the final piece that I mentioned, so we have two rezonings, now we have the development agreement. So I want to kind of cover some of the highlights of that, and there are definitely several pieces to it. Okay, so the first piece to the development agreement, the applicant is offering to donate approximately 2 acres to the county. And again, there's no real strings attached to it. They're going to donate the land, and we can decide, how to best use it in perpetuity. We think it might be a public safety site, but we're not certain until that decision is made. The developer has also committed themselves to making the site as nearly pad ready as possible. So what does that mean? They're willing to undertake the preliminary grading. When the neighborhood's graded, they'll go ahead and grade our site. This site sits on a knoll, which is certainly very good from a drainage standpoint. They're also going to stub out the water and sewer infrastructure. So again, that would be very easy for the county to tie into. And there'll also be common conveyance of stormwater between the site to the neighborhood. Again, these are all features that will certainly make the site as efficient, to be developed as efficiently as possible and at the least expense to the county if and when it chooses to take on that project. Okay. So now another common element with our impact fees are, our development agreements are fees. And so the applicant has proposed a rooftop fee of $2,180 per home, which at 325 homes, roughly totals $708,500. Unfortunately, Kim's not here to check my math. I am a social scientist, so I do get numbers wrong sometimes. So that number is subject to change, certainly, for correction. And so the rationale between this fee is that the council is considering an impact fee study, which this is the same number that is referenced as a maximum amount in that study. The benefit of having it incorporated into a development agreement, as the council knows, is these are generally unrestricted funds, so the council has a lot of discretion in how to use it, and the funds would be likely collected at the building permit stage. Parallel that, there is a school fee being proposed at $500 per home, which would give you roughly $162,500 for a total collection. And again, that would be also payable at the building permit stage. The final, and what I consider to be kind of key element of the development agreement, is an enhanced intersection improvement at Henry Harris and Shelley Mullis, which involves construction of a roundabout. And there's some complexity to that, and I'm going to outline that for you as well. So let's kind of talk about roundabouts. So at the intersection of Shelley Mullis and Henry Harris, the applicant prepared a traffic impact study that has been reviewed by the county and SCDOT, and it reflected that their traffic could be managed and mitigated against by using a signalized intersection with associated turn lane, left turn lanes constructed. And that would be done in concert with the Harris Mill improvements for this intersection. So they would kind of work in partnership with that. Well, through the rezoning and development agreement discussion process, the county had conveyed to the applicant, we would much rather see a roundabout at this intersection versus a signalized intersection. Roundabouts are considerably safer, and they're certainly more aesthetically pleasing. And it also fits the template of this corridor because you have a roundabout at Jim Wilson, and you're going to have and Henry Harris, and you're going to have a roundabout at Marvin and Henry Harris. So this would be the natural improvement you would want to see to connect all the, kind of a string of pearls, if you will, down Henry Harris with these traffic circles. So in order to achieve it, there is definitely a significant cost difference between a signalized intersection and a roundabout. And I'll let the developer can certainly elaborate further if that's helpful. But there is absolutely a difference in cost. So, compliments to the development team. They took in that feedback, they took it seriously, and went and really tried to come up with a proposal that would help fund this roundabout in a manner that they could still have a profitable project, but we could also realize our infrastructure goals for Henry Harris. So, with that, there's specific roles and responsibilities for between the developer and the county. So the developer roles are as follows. One is that the developer will construct the roundabout and will be responsible for any cost overruns. So look, if they miscalculate what the price of asphalt will be, it's on them. Same thing with any other cost increase. They've acknowledged they'll take ownership. They'll also coordinate with Lennar. Again, they have an intersection project at this. They have a project at this intersection as well. So Lennar's verbally indicated they would be willing to, in essence, write a check for their improvements versus constructing something that'll just get torn up, and there'd be greater efficiencies that way. So the developer will certainly will undertake that coordination with county support. And then the developer is also committed to contributing approximately $100,000 to kind of as gap funding to fill in the financial gap. The county also has some roles and responsibilities as part of this, which are as follows. One is with the roundabout, you're going to potentially have more right-of-way acquisition than you would with a signalized intersection. So the developer's asking if they can't acquire right-of-way through their normal processes, they have asked that the county commit to using condemnation to acquire the right-of-way. The second is with the Harris Mill Residential Improvement District, there is an ability for the county to receive up to 4% of the bond amount to invest in the area of that project. And so the developer has asked, which is roughly $300,000, and that number is based on the actual bond amount, but we think it would be roughly that dollar amount. And so the developer's asking for that money to be committed towards the roundabout project. The third piece is just to prepare to have our legal staff prepare the third-party agreement between the county, the developer, and/or SCDOT if they need to be a part of this grant agreement. That's a complex, according to to John, that's a complex agreement. There would be significant time involved. The good news is that the development agreements always have a provision to provide a certain dollar amount for administrative costs and legal expenses. So we think that would be an eligible expense and could be a neutral, could be cost neutral to the county. And finally, the last is the developer is asked to be relieved of a road improvement at the intersection of Henry Nesbitt and Waxhaw Marvin Road, which consists of a right turn lane. This turn lane is actually in North Carolina. It's about 600 feet away from the South Carolina border. This is something that we're staff and the various consultants are still coordinating on, and we'd just like to kind of put a pin in this and kind of have some further discussions on that. For those that just aren't familiar with Waxhaw Marvin and Henry Nesbitt, I did just want to provide a quick exhibit. The star is the Wilson Creek site. The circle is the intersection of question. It's about 1.3 miles apart from each other. Again, I just wanted to familiarize you with that location if you weren't already aware of it. Okay, so from a finding standpoint, we do find both the medium-density residential and the institutional zoning districts to be consistent with the comprehensive plan, particularly the neighborhood mixed-use future land use classification. And we also believe that the zoning and the type of development being proposed would be consistent with the other surrounding neighborhoods in this area. So we do ask, or we did take this before the Planning Commission at their November meeting, where they did recommend 6-1 to recommend the council approve this project. The INR committee considered this project, more specifically the development agreement, at 2 of its meetings, most recently at the January 26th meeting. Some of the key topics discussed at the INR meeting were the Roundabout project, the impact fee rate. Should we use the rate in the study? Should we use an alternative rate? I keep saying impact fee. I mean the rooftop fee rate versus using the rate that's in the impact fee study, and then the school fee amount. I think an interesting discussion also came about is whether or not the fees should be grown over time, which we think there's actually some good logic to that. So if a project gets delayed, the fee grows through some common metrics. So these are, but the INR did recommend approval of the development agreement by a vote of 2-1. So that is all the information I have before you. The applicant is here, and I think does want to say a few words to introduce themselves and outline any other items that I may have missed. But I'll certainly make myself available for any questions that you have.
All right, any questions?
Of course, from District 6, thankful that I am. I just question, everything that's brought before us is a move to make higher density. Is there going to ever be a situation where we're not going to be facing a higher density in these neighborhoods? Or we just, should we just go ahead and take every look at these, eventually make it medium density at one time?
You want me to respond? Okay. Sorry. No, look, I think and I'll just refer, I think it's a big area, but I'd say I'll say the northern, I'll call it the northern Panhandle area is an incredibly desirable place where families want to live. Look, it's got a great quality of life. It's got amazing schools, and thanks to the council's hard work and administration, we've got low taxes and just a lot of good reasons why a family would want to move here. And that's, you could make that argument actually for anywhere in the county. And so you're going to have that pressure, I think, to want to, air quotes, suburbanize the northern Panhandle area. I do think that there are areas of the county where it's like that's a decision point, right? We talk about the growth is marching, right? It's coming, it's marching. And should it continue to march like that? So everything, is everything just going to be one big subdivision? And quite frankly, when there's a lot of areas of like Union County you drive through, that's all you see. You just drive down the roads and it's just bam, 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 bam. And so that was something like when we did the small area plan that we just approved this evening, we asked that question specifically, should it just be a continuation of the Panhandle area, northern Panhandle, and having it march to the lower section, or should it be something different? And we asked the community that as well. And we heard a strong response, no, that's fine what's going on in the northern Panhandle, but that's not necessarily what we want here. And so I think you will see areas that, that may not make sense, that we still want to keep maybe some of that rural feel or lower density development. I think, in many respects, construction's got to a point where it's hard to do a subdivision that's with 1 acre lots. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's more challenging. And it would be probably more of a smaller nature. I think you'll see more in the northern upper Panhandle. You'll see that pressure. Again, that proximity to Mecklenburg and that employment market and just the quality of life benefits that we enjoy throughout the county. I think that combination is just going to bring people there and put demand on developers to find land available to develop.
Are you saying, Rock, as we move south, it may become medium to low density, probably because of the high demand in the northern area?
And I'm gonna probably skip ahead to the comp plan. So, but we talk about this because we're going to be starting the comp plan process not too far off, and that's where we need to be answering a lot of these questions. But my unofficial answer, because this is just like me randomly thinking out loud during my drive to work, I could see a scenario. We focus, and I just focused there with Mr. Blackman's question on the Panhandle, the northern Panhandle, right? And that's the growth center, right? Well, why do you necessarily need one growth center. And I could see a scenario where we try to help, we have that growth center, and that's without, that's obvious. But could, on the southern end, around the city of Lancaster, could we look at ways to ignite that as almost like a growth center around the city itself and the surrounding unincorporated areas? And so, we have two two distinct areas where, growth is occurring and facilitated. And the council's looked at different tools for areas they want to encourage growth, ways that they can assist, and maybe that might be a second, appropriate area. So I don't think it's all urban or suburbanized up here and everything else just stays rural. I think it could be more than one. My personal opinion is looking at around the city of Lancaster, of where that could be a second growth center for the county.
And add to what Mr. Burhan said, it depends on the availability of sewer. That's the infrastructure. Sewer, like the Ladar project, sewer will be running from the bypass all the way up Shiloh Unity. That's going to open up a lot of desirable property north of the city of Lancaster.
So I hope I answered your question, Mr. McCurdy.
Yeah, but, I understand about infrastructure, but I know high density, I personally wouldn't want to live in a high density area. And I'm sure other folks would. And I guess that's a choice that one has to take, whether they choose to live in high density or low density. And I'm sure it depends also on the affordability of it.
So I think these are great questions, and that's why we are, I think I mentioned this in a prior report, we're going out to bid for the new comprehensive plan by end of fiscal year. And so I think that's where, I'm glad we're talking about these things and that you're hearing these cases and thinking about that just like we are. And so I think that's a great opportunity to kind of really put a laser beam focus on that.
And 2.5 units per acre is not high density.
Well, I got an issue with that. I got an issue with that because you're telling us that it's 1.93 units per acre, but in the cluster development, it's 6 or 7 houses per acre in that 50-foot lot.
So I'm just scrolling back to the concept plan just so I can help articulate. No, Mr. Graham, I don't disagree with you that.
But I think that's the general public is misled in thinking it's 1.93 per acre, but it's not. It's a high-density development of 6 or 7 houses per acre on those 50-foot lots.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with your train of thought. I don't know what the exact number is, but your big picture, your point is correct that the way we calculate density is just if you've got 100 acres, it doesn't matter if it's 25% floodplain or wetlands or if it's 0%. We base it off what's called the gross acreage. What Mr. Graham is correctly stating is that if you look at the net density, which is netting out unbuildable areas like 6 Mile Creek or Heel Splitter or what have you, then the density would be higher. So I think that I'm just trying to.
That is my point, and I didn't realize that until a month or so ago that's the way it worked. If you have 100 acres and you're allowed a house to an acre and there's 50 it's not developed, you can put 100 houses on the remaining 50 acres. So I didn't realize that.
Okay. No, I'm glad we're having this time. I'm glad we're having this. I mean, just keep in mind, look, we all drive around Lancaster and the flat and dry properties, there are not so many of those anymore. And so you're going to see a lot of these encumbered properties like this. But your point is valid, that if you look at it just on the flat, dry sections, the density would rise.
Mr. Chairman, I believe this part of the county would welcome more growth. All you got to do is walk down Main Street and see the empty buildings. I agree with Mr. Blackman. But we also need more people down in this part of our county so that we can maybe get more than fast food restaurants. Maybe we can get more stores that we can shop at without having to go to Pineville. So as far as I'm concerned, I welcome the growth down in this part of the county because we desperately need it. Growing up here as a boy, you couldn't find a parking spot on Saturday morning. Now you can park anywhere you want to because there's nothing to shop for here. And I'd love to see that change. We need to make a change there. And if it's bringing them east of Lancaster, they don't have to be in the city limits as far as I'm concerned, just be here. And maybe that'll cause more growth in our downtown area. Because we're a beautiful little community, but we're going to pot because of vacant stores.
Would anyone like to hear from the developer? Would that be appropriate at this time? Absolutely. Come, state your name, address for the record, please.
Sir. Ken Holbrooks, 1108 Industrial Drive, Matthews, North Carolina. And lots of good dialogue, appreciate it, and would love to get into some of those questions in a minute. If you don't mind, let me introduce a few folks here. You've already heard from Mrs. Wilson. I appreciate her coming on behalf of the property and allowing us to shepherd this through a process. My business partner, Tom Waters, is back there. Unfortunately, my other business partner, Tim Coey, we're tag teaming. We have a zoning in Cornelius tonight where we're doing a very similar project with very similar dialogue. We've been down here since the mid-90s. I heard someone say earlier there wasn't zoning then. I can stand to attest that's not true. I did one in 1994 and was at Indian Land High School as they sat up on a stage about 10 feet in the air, and I think it was like 26 planning commissioners at the time. So we've been here for a while, and we appreciate, and some of the things we're going to talk about tonight will be some of the things that have gone on over time. We would like to be a part of solving those. We appreciate staff. We've had, I probably shouldn't share this, maybe because of COVID or our issues, but 9 months later, here we are after working on this project with a lot of folks. This plan reflects a lot of dialogue with you guys, with staff, our consultants. There was a lot of environmental things that we looked at here. We'll come to density discussions in a minute, Councilman Graham, but the bottom line is this property actually has double the open space, and it's not all lowland. You'll see these parks maybe don't give you perspective in terms of how large they are, but they actually represent 20 acres or so of the property that we decided to amenitize for the community. We could push into many of these things, even Hill Splitter aside, there you can see in there. We decided not to push for the extra 100 units that you could get here because we've been down here before, we'd like to be down here again and do more projects, and we think it's the right way to handle development. And I think that's why we've been down here for 25 years or so. As part of that, I want to make sure, I already spoke, we had double the open space. It's 46% common open space on the project right now. As part of the development plan, we were struggling with what to do on this corner. We thought it was a bad idea to have lots there. We had a lot of good dialogue with both Rox and Steve on this, and they came to this conclusion, why don't we try to find a public use for that? And we said, that's great. We love that opportunity. I think the Wilson family likes that opportunity. I think fire station site gets talked about. Honestly, that's on you. You guys know better than we do. We are going to do the things that Rox talked about. The only reason we don't commit to doing more than rough grading is because honestly you don't know what you're doing yet, so all we can do is kind of pad it out and leave it for you at that point, as well as stub utilities out and make sure that we have the right conveyance down. And Rox talked about the collector road. He's right. When he first brought it to us, we all looked at it and said, nobody hears from NCDOT, but it was really foolishly drawn. It went almost across the creek itself. So we've worked to try to find ways to embellish that road, make it larger, get houses off of it, driveways, et cetera, and make sure that there's a way to get around that area without having to get onto Henry Harris maybe at certain times. One of the things that came up, and I know we've had a lot of dialogue on this, is the roundabout. Obviously, we go through your process. There's a traffic impact analysis. We do it, honestly. It's a combination of South Carolina DOT, your consultants, our consultants. We're not really involved in the process. They tell us what we're doing, and we go on from there. We have that, and we've been working along with all of you guys, INR, staff, et cetera, and there is a fairly reasonable, normal solution that's on the table that we looked at, which is a light. We heard many folks in the community when we did a neighborhood meeting that was very well attended. I think you were there and broadcast to more than the probably 100 people that were at the meeting. And we had a few comments then. Hey, we like roundabouts. We get that. An old DOT guy at one point shared with me, accidents at roundabouts happen at 10 miles an hour. Accidents at T intersections happen at 50. People die on those. It's a good idea. We agree with that. And once again, in the spirit of putting our hand out, we said, let's try to find a way to make it work. The only issue is it's a lot more expensive to do those in a light. And when I say that, it's a seven-figure number more than that. And I think you've had some internal, I think Jeff has put together some numbers as well to help you guys out on that. Once again, we're willing to do that. And so we're working along with staff to try to find out how that can be done. We're not trying to get away with anything. We're trying to make sure that we just do the right thing for that intersection. And it does require, I don't think asking for more than, Lennar has money that's going to go into the intersection. Lennar said, we don't really care if you're going to build it. Figure that out. The same with the 4% money on the $8,320,000. That would start to get it down to a smaller seven-figure number, and that would be a little bit more palatable for us. So I tried to address that a little bit. I don't know how to, there were comments in terms of density. A 50-foot lot is usually about a 4 density. At least our land planners share that. We can have them come and discuss it another day. The bottom line is, I mean, we do projects all over town. I understand some people don't want to live in those. The ironic part is today people want less yard and they want more open space. That's why we have 46% open space, because part of it, maybe nobody wants to hear that in the county, they don't pay taxes on it at that point. So that we go with what the market asks for. These are not going to be inexpensive houses by any means. We were part of Shelley Woods next door. It'd be very comparable to those, or 3s to 4s and up at this point, and we feel very comfortable we're going to be at least there. So with that, I've spoken quickly. I don't want to miss any questions from you guys, because I know we've got multiple things on the table from this, but if I've missed anything, please ask. I'm here to answer, and I know we've had plenty of dialogue before.
All right. Okay, you had signed up. We do have a public hearing on this. Mr. Holbrooks has signed up.
Yes, sir, that's me, sorry.
Yeah, I know. Do you want to,
I did that.
say anything else?
No, sir, I did that as a recommendation, just to
Okay.
make sure I had placeholder on the docket.
Okay,
Yes,
all
sir.
right. Well, I've got you on all 3 of these, so. If
I'll
we got
relinquish that.
If we have any more questions, we'll call you up.
Okay, yes, sir, thank you.
Okay, so, Mr. Holbrooks took care of the public hearing on this. And now I'm looking for a motion to bring this matter to the floor.
So moved.
I have a motion from Ms. McGriff, and I have a second from Mr. Honeycutt. All right, any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I have known this piece of property ever since I was a little boy. Miss Wilson talked about her grandmother, Miss Wilson. She not only taught me, she taught my 4 brothers, and she taught my mother as well. And she was one of those teachers that you remember for all your life because they just touch you. And I'm sure you remember her as well. There were many Saturday in the summer that we spent at the fishing pond, and I can tell you it had the best brim beds in all of Lancaster County. I don't know what the shape it is now, but they were good then. Development in a fast-growing area is always a question of how are we going to handle it and how are we going to do it. And to Mr. Blackman's question, I think when you look at switching from a low-density residential to a medium-density residential with this kind of overlay plan, I think the one thing that sort of gets lost in the translation is that if somebody came in and they did a low-density residential development here, they're not going to pay for a roundabout. They're probably going to fight paying for development fees, and they're not going to dedicate 2 acres of land to the county for a future fire station because it doesn't make financial sense to them. And we're not in the business of making financial sense to developers But when we look at trying to make a development better for the community, we have to take those things into consideration.
All right, thank you, Mr. Carnes. Any, Mr. Graham?
You know, we had a discussion about all this high density in Indian land. And when is it gonna stop? How many houses, rocks, are already permitted to be built in the Panhandle approximately? 4,000, 5,000, 7,000?
We're, I mean, so just for reference purposes, so we just ran some numbers on single-family home permits in 2020 calendar year. I think it was, not exactly, but it was around 1,400 countywide. In terms of your specific question, the entitled residential projects, yes, we probably have somewhere around 3, maybe a little more than that, 3,000 entitled units.
And I mean, how is the infrastructure, the schools, the fire, the EMS, the traffic? Now, while we have a development agreement, yes, we get paid for maybe for the fire station or for the fire truck, but that's not where the real cost is. The real cost is a recurring cost and having to staff it. The real cost is building a school for the children. I mean, they've got $500 in this agreement for a school, for the school. I mean, I just got a concern that all Indian land, Ms. McGriff, would also like to have rural pieces left and not end up with a bunch of high density. And they are high density. You can walk down between the houses and literally touch them. Now, people may want to buy them, but boy, I wonder what it's going to look like in the future. So I would be really cautious about okaying any more high-density developments in the Indian land area. And I agree with Mr. Honeycutt. I wish, and the rest of Indian land wishes, that growth would move south and spread the wealth and the heartache that goes with growth.
Yep, it's coming.
Well, I would like to say too, y'all, since our last meeting, I've had the opportunity to be in the planning office a couple of times, visiting with Rox, and then another time with Ashley. And I want to say they are doing a great job for us. It's a big deal to be down there and to do this kind of work, and the volume of work that they're doing. And I'd just like to say thank you to the planning department for what they've done and what they're doing for us.
I would echo that. The planning department, I think, is doing a great job, and they got a tough job.
All right, any more comments? Any more discussion? Thank you, Mr. Brands. All right, right now, we're at our first reading of ordinance 2021-1701. Have a motion from approval. Are we ready to vote? I think we're ready to vote. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? First reading of ordinance 2021-1701 passes by a vote of 6 for and 1 opposed. All right, we have already 9H. There is a public hearing. Mr. Holbrook has already spoke. Mr. Burhans, is there anything else before we have a motion on this?
I have nothing further to add, Mr. Chair.
Am I good on the public hearing moving over? Mr. Holbrook was the only one?
Correct. Mr. Holbrook is the only one to sign up. Yes.
Okay, so at this time, I'm looking for a motion on first reading of ordinance 2021-1702 regarding rezoning property owned by Wilson Acres LLC from LDR to INS.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Honeycutt, a second from Mr. Mosteller. Any discussion? I think we're ready to vote. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval of first reading of ordinance 2021-1702. Same thing, let's move down to first reading of ordinance 2021-1703. Again, Mr. Holbrooks is the only one that signed up for public comment. He has already spoken, and I don't think he wants to say anything else. Is that correct, Mr. Holbrooks? He's good. Okay. Mr. Burhans has already went over this, so I'm looking for a motion to bring this matter to the floor.
So moved.
Second.
Had a motion from who? Mr. Honeycutt? And a second from Mr. McGriff. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I got a motion to amend
All right, this is on, okay, go ahead.
1703, right?
All right.
I move to amend ordinance 2021-1703 to amend the development agreement attached to the ordinance as Exhibit A, so that the exhibit incorporates proposed edits, form developer regarding assignability of developer rights and obligations contained in section 4.01B and 4.01D. I also move to amend Exhibit A in Section 4.01A and 4.01B to reflect that any fees collected for public safety or for the school district shall be collected at an issuance of a building permit.
I'll second that.
I have a motion, an amendment from Mr. Mosteller, a second from Mr. Blackman. Any discussion on that amendment? Let's vote on the amendment. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Any more discussion on this?
Any clarification on the rooftop fees amount, or can we adjust that as we move forward?
Mr. DeBose.
If the council members want any additional information from staff or simply want to consider those matters at your leisure and at greater detail, those can certainly be finalized moving forward. At present, the development agreement that is an exhibit to the ordinance contains the $2,180 amount lifted from the impact fee study. Again, the developer, I believe the version before you in your agenda package has the school fee with a blank. The developer has proposed a $500 per home fee. But again, I don't believe y'all have to make any final decision on those matters, at least on first reading, Councilwoman. I would also note that the development agreement as drafted does not contain an inflationary section that provides for yearly inflationary adjustments of any fees collected. I know that is one debate topic and point that y'all have brought up tonight. If you would want that incorporated, I would suggest that council make a motion to direct that the agreement be amended to reflect inflationary application of some inflationary factor to the fee. Likewise, there are no specific provisions right now for the roundabout, because that is still a conceptual matter before council that is unique to this development agreement. We draft these off of a template. So if council wants that fleshed out further, I would also just humbly request some direction by motion to amend from council to include verbiage to deal with the roundabout. So as far as amendatory matters that I might need, it would be inflationary factor and the roundabout. As far as open items for council, of course, everything's technically open until third reading. To your point, Councilwoman McGriff.
Should it be a separate amendment from Mr. Mosteller, or should he withdraw his and add to the amendment?
whatever way y'all want to do it, a withdrawal and then holistic amendment's fine. Y'all have already passed that amendment, so it really might be cleaner to just have a second amendment to the motion.
Mr. Chairman, one more thing, just in the discussion phase here. I would maybe like to see us explore, when we talk about the rooftop fees of 2180, that study was done for purchases over 100,000. There's a lot of things that are required that are under 100,000. And I'm not saying I want to just jam that figure up a lot higher, but I'd like to see staff come back maybe with another amount that maybe would incorporate some of the smaller requirements that are going to come from development. That's not included in the the impact fees per se. So,
That's a good point, Councilman Blackman. I mean, as I referenced, that 2180 figure comes from the maximum impact fee allowed as set forth in the impact fee study. So that's what the study arrived at as the cost per rooftop of growth, with new growth paying for growth. But that study does have limitations, as you've referenced. There's a minimum threshold for any purchase with impact fees of $100,000. So it's really facilities and big ticket items like ladder trucks. Doesn't include patrol cars, other smaller capital expenditures that the county may have. It's certainly, I believe, something staff can look into and provide y'all additional information on. But I think from a broader standpoint, again, if there's a desire to amend for second reading to include inflationary principles and verbiage memorializing this roundabout proposal, I could certainly make those upon a motion to amend, which would obviously provide me my direction. With regard to fees, again, the exhibit to y'all's package has schools blank and rooftops is 2180. Y'all can, of course, consider amendment of those amounts at second reading. Or
And one more thing too, wasn't in the presentation something about a turn lane in North Carolina that the developer wants to be exempted from, and does that then put some burden on us to put a turn lane in North Carolina?
No, it does not. Your memory is correct, but no, that does not create a obligation on Lancaster County to construct that turn lane. And sorry, losing my train of thought.
So was he not asking to be relieved of that?
That is correct. So that is correct. So
how do we relieve him of a North Carolina requirement?
So the traffic study that was scoped for this project included the intersection of Waxhaw Marvin and Henry Nesbitt Road, which is roughly 600 feet from the Lancaster boundary. And let me just go ahead and get to that exhibit so you can never be refreshed. So again, the red circle is that intersection. So it's a simple stop-controlled intersection. Gets a fair amount of traffic from South Carolina through it. And so the traffic study that was prepared identified a right turn lane with 200 feet of storage and associated tapers to be constructed at that intersection to mitigate this project's impact on it. And so as part of the roundabout program that's been put together, in order to make, from the developer's perspective, in order to make the roundabout feasible for them, they are asking that they not be required to construct that roundabout. This is something, again, we've put kind of a pin in that we'd like to continue some conversations with the developer on that, and perhaps perhaps look at that intersection. Maybe there's some other alternatives to making it better without constructing that full turn lane, so we could again achieve the roundabout, which I think we've heard not only from from council, but also the citizens, that would be the desired improvement at Shelley Molson and Henry Harris, but also using air quotes, do no harm on this intersection in North Carolina, who we regularly partner with on stormwater, and I have to believe also public safety and other matters. And so that's the background and the direction we're at. We'll like to be able to provide an update, ideally at possibly second reading, on what the resolution of that is.
Mr. Burhans, what was the input from NCDOT on the improvements there?
Sure. We've spoken with them several times regarding that project, And they've been my characterization is incredibly diplomatic about it. So they were a reviewer of the traffic study, and they are, based on their review of that study, they agree that, we see that the improvement is warranted, and, we would certainly welcome that improvement at the intersection. They also recognize from the diplomatic hat that, look, we are in a separate state. We have no jurisdiction over this project, and we defer to Lancaster County and SCDOT. But yes, we would like to see that improvement, but we respect the jurisdictional boundaries and decision-making.
Thank you. I was just asking because a lot of times, we'll get traffic impact analysis back, and then SCDOT will come back and say, well, we're not requiring that, even though the traffic impact analysis says that it needs to be done.
That's correct. That's correct. Unfortunately, that does happen, but that is not the case with this. But again, it's something that we need to kind of work with the consultants and the development team and county staff need to work and come back to you with an update on. We just don't have that at present, but we did want to put a pin in it so it didn't just get lost between in the cracks.
Rox, if we're talking about making a change in the development agreement, then we'll have to have another I&R meeting to do this, or how are we going to handle that?
So again, we've kind of
You can't just go in there and change something,
Are you talking about in regards to the process?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, I believe the council is taking kind of a timeout on the individual committees for, I think, roughly 6 months. And going with this committee of the whole process, which is the first one, or second one, I think, is occurring tomorrow afternoon. And so, what we would like to do is bring future DAs to the committee of the whole at a much earlier stage in the process. So again, you get an early introduction. Everybody gets an early introduction. And then from that point forward, we could bring it back to committee of the whole as an option, or just go straight to full council, and we would certainly seek some feedback from the chairman or others on what their advice would be. So I think that will make it an efficient process, and it'll also make council more aware of the project much earlier in the process, so they can start thinking about whether this would be good for the community and what they feel might be appropriate for the project.
Mr. Chair, I move to amend for the inflationary costs on the impact fees and verbiage for the roundabout.
Second.
I have a amendment from Mr. Mostello, a second from Ms. McGriff. Mr. DeBose, will that be sufficient at this point?
Yeah, that's fine. I can present the language at the next meeting, and if it needs to be wordsmith or further amended by y'all, that's fine. But yes, I've got my direction.
Okay. All right. So we have an amendment from Mr. Mostello, seconded by Ms. McGriff. Any discussion on that?
I think Mr. Graham.
No, I did not on the amendment. I got a comment after we get through with that.
Okay, so you all right right now?
Yeah.
All right, we're ready to vote on that amendment. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Mr. Graham, anything else?
Yeah, I'm really not clear on this impact fee for the schools. I mean, it's $500, and yet we got a blank in ours, so what is it?
Go ahead, Mr. DeBose.
My understanding is INR never came to any agreement on what to include impact
That's
for
correct.
school impact fee, which is why it's blank in your document. I did solicit from the developer with this document blank if you have any suggested changes, because I know one thing that they discussed was this assignability issue, which frankly is kind of a non-issue to make that amendment, to go ahead and present what they would like to see in the agreement, since it is this kind of open discussion process that occurred before INR. So developers put 500 as a school fee in their version. Again, it is blank in the version attached to the amendment. The only motions I've heard from council are to address the assignability, to address that fees, if set and then the amount set, be collected at the building permit stage, and that this inflationary clause be added and provisions for the roundabout. As I understand it, the version before council on this vote, which is the version that was in the agenda package, still has a blank for the school fees. Council could suggested amount for the school fees, except the $500 suggested by the developer, or if council needs to consider that further, council could pass the ordinance and its attached exhibit as is with the amendments already made, and that amount would still be blank.
What was the rationale around that $500? Maybe that could help us in deciding.
I believe that $500 amount was an amount contained in earlier development agreements that the county has entered into. Specifically, I believe Treetops may have had that amount in it. And those matters are public record, of course, so developers probably done their research and seeing what charges may have been charged in the past for a school fee.
I think there were a number of development agreements that had that amount in it, just wasn't Treetops.
That's right, we did.
So are we saying that's what the amount should be?
Well, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that, you know, he said it was one specific
Yeah.
development, and there were a number that included that amount.
So how are we going to decide what the fee is?
Rob, could you do some research on that and see how did the $500 come about? And how was it determined?
Yeah, but that's been a long time ago, Charlotte.
Still, we gotta know the reason why we got 500.
That's all right,
You like to know the reason we got 500?
I would.
Go ahead, I was gonna tell her.
When we were initially talking about doing fees, Larry McCullough was chairman at that point in time, and he came up with $1,000 for the county, and you know, there were some requests to the school district of what amount they would like, and an answer was not forthcoming from the school district, so Mr. McCullough said, we'll do 500 for the school district. So that was how those numbers were derived.
Okay. You did that, didn't you?
I heard that we threw a dart at the dartboard.
What a way to come up with a number.
No.
All right, any more discussion or questions for anybody on this first reading? All right, hearing none, we're ready to vote on first reading of ordinance 2021-1703 as amended. All in favor, raise your right hand. The first reading of ordinance 2021-1703 passes by 7-0. Now does this need to stay on the non-consent?
Yeah, because there's questions.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, let's go down to 9J, public hearing and first reading of ordinance 2021-1707 regarding rezoning property owned by Tracy Griffin from RN to INS. Mr. Burhans.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is a proposal to rezone one parcel from a rural neighborhood to the institutional district. The parcel is just under a half acre in size. It's located at 4889 Charlotte Highway, roughly 200 feet south of Van Wyck Elementary School. The rezoning's intent is to open a hair salon business, and the applicant is Ms. Tracy Griffin. Just to give you some locational references, the parcel is that teeny little parcel outlined in blue, just south of the school, which is what you're seeing there in the institutional district already. Just to give you kind of a bird's eye view, it is this brick build. The subject property consists of this brick building that you're seeing to the left. I think it's previously a firehouse. It's also, as you can tell from the roof, it's previously been used as a church, and now it'll be used as a personal services type establishment. Then just across the street, just showing you the wood line, and it appears to be a rainy day that day when they took the pictures.
All right.
Again, comprehensive plan, this comprehensive plan, the proposal is consistent with not only the comprehensive plan, but also the recently adopted small area plan, as it designates this area as institutional. Institutional zoning does also surround the subject property. Planning Commission reviewed this at their January meeting, recommended unanimously to recommend approval, as staff also recommended approval. We do have a minor text amendment we're going to have to work on for minimum lot area for this proposal, but we will have that move forward in March with the Planning Commission. I'll take any questions that you may have.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
I got a question.
Gotta have a public hearing first.
I withdraw, but
And I got a question too. You asked me for a question.
Any questions for Mr. Burham?
Yeah, I got a question. Why are we doing it the INS? I mean, why are you not doing that the neighborhood business? I mean, it seems odd to do a hair salon for INS.
Well, I guess the simplest answer I have is that, the intent is to use it for a hair salon. It's allowed in INS, and there's a large section of INS right next to it. So it just seemed from a zoning consistency standpoint to fit well.
Well, it just seems really odd. And isn't that church closed now and it's no longer functional? Why, so, I mean, to me, it makes more sense for it to be neighborhood business or some kind of business along 521 rather than INS.
Well, I think also, if I could just complement that one step further, is, that's part of the feedback, we talked about the small area plan, was they didn't want to see, or the plan does not contemplate having kind of commercial, extended all along the US 521 frontage, and maybe be a little more strategic in where those commercial clusters occur. And so this, in our mind, was also a way that we could accommodate the proposal in a manner that's consistent with the plan as well as consistent with the business interests. And that's why we came up with institutional. That was another rationale for coming up with institutional.
Well, thank you for the explanation.
You're welcome.
Any more questions for Mr. Burhans?